everybody, this is Name Your Game, a video game podcast brought to you by SharcTank.com. Each episode, we have a new guest with us so we can talk to them about their favorite games from the past and present. I'm Tim.
And I'm Dane.
Along with us, we have an indie game designer who recently had a Kickstarter successfully funded for his game Four-Sided Fantasy, the lead game designer for Ludo Land, Logan Fieth. How's it going, Logan?
Thanks for having me. It's going well.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. It's really nice to meet you. I haven't actually had the opportunity to try one of your games. I'm pretty sure Tim has been playing one of your games. What was it called, Tim?
I played The Fourth Wall.
The Fourth Wall.
Oh, okay, cool.
What were your impressions, Tim?
It was a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, it's, it was made as a school project, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
It was short but sweet. The mechanics were really cool, and I know that I saw that you're kind of implementing the same unique mechanic into Four-Sided Fantasy, so I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, and it was the first project that I kind of released to the public and tried to promote and everything like that, submitted to competitions, so...
Nice.
Yeah.
How did it do in competitions?
We got into the Indie Game Challenge in 2012, and then we almost got into PAX 10. They did like a panel where it was called the PAX 11 through 13, where for PAX Dev, where they basically said why you almost made it and what the game could have used.
Sure.
So that was really nice too.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. So, something that we ask all of our guests on this show, and what we've been told by the other game designers we've had on the show is that this is kind of a tough or an unfair question, but what is your favorite video game of all time?
Oh, man. I know that one like the back of my hand. That's easy.
Oh, well, awesome.
Shadow of the Colossus, for sure.
Nice.
Awesome.
I think we did speak about Shadow of the Colossus briefly with, I think, Brett from 17-Bit, but we didn't really go into it. We didn't really go into it in depth. And that's one that I can talk a lot about. I love that game.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to be on the sidelines because I haven't had a chance to play it. I've seen it getting played, and whenever I saw it, I was like, I got to give that game a try. But anyway, what about it makes it your favorite game?
Yeah, what stands out to you about Shadow of the Colossus after all these years?
So I really, as a designer, I really value quality over quantity.
Sure.
And Shadow of the Colossus is basically like that mantra, the video game.
Yeah, it's a very good example of that for sure.
Yeah, Braid's another one of my favorites, but Shadow of the Colossus is... I don't know why, that's like the shining example to me.
Yeah.
This isn't in the game per se, but I've heard that they originally had 40 Colossi planned the game, and then they cut it down to 16 because they just too many of them were too similar or didn't stand up to the rest of the quality of the game. And it was one of the first games that I played that was daring enough to be short and full price.
Yeah.
I've only played it once, and I mean all the way through. I go back to it to remind myself like things that they did that were cool. But
yeah, same here.
Like replayability is a big thing for a lot of people, but for me, the first time you play it should really leave a mark, and it definitely left a mark with me.
That's awesome. I guess I want to make a cheesy comment that almost. It's almost a pun that it left a mark on you because the Colossi have a mark where you can attack them. But anyway, that's lame. Yeah, it left a mark on me as well. I remember exactly when I played that game, right around when it came out. I think it was back close to 2005, if I'm correct, because I remember I had just moved up here to the Seattle area, had a bunch of new friends, and was going to college for the first time, and I remember picking that game up and playing it with my friend, one of my best friends, the reason I moved up here, to hang out with him. And we played it together. It left such a mark on him that actually he wants to cosplay the Wander even today, even though he hasn't done it yet and the game's been out for this long. Like, it's still his goal to cosplay the Wander. And he's a bearded fellow, and it's the only cosplay or the only reason why he would actually shave his beard would be if he had the opportunity to be the Wander from that game. And yeah, we played it together and just both kind of had the same experience. Just it gripped us, the story and the immersion, and just... we passed the controller around, and I love that game a lot.
That's funny because you kind of had a entirely different experience playing it than myself. I stayed home sick from school the day that it came out, and I went and got it and played it by myself alone, like all just in one sitting, basically.
Sure. Yeah, I guess it is pretty different because I kind of share that experience with a friend.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it's... I can't imagine anybody playing that game for any significant period of time, though, and not having a similar reaction to it. Yeah, for sure.
It's definitely a game that's on my 2 playlist, high up there, but my 2 playlist is very, very long.
Very long. Well, you're in luck, because if you do decide to sit down and play it, I now have the HD version for PS3, and we have a 3D television in this home.
Yeah, now
what I was
going to mention was one of the reasons is because that was around the time when I was transferring to being like a purely PC gamer, as opposed to when I was younger, I played console.
Sure.
These days, I pretty much am exclusively PC, and there are titles such as Shadow of the Colossus that I've missed because of that I really regret, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a second one, right? A Shadows of the Colossus 2?
No, there wasn't. They were working on a sort of successor title called The Last Guardian.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
And unfortunately, there really hasn't been any word of whether or not that's going to still come out. We were hoping with this year's E3 we'd hear something about it, but instead there was rumors of its cancellation, but then those rumors actually ended up getting struck down. But yeah, it seems like it's just in a total limbo, unfortunately.
Yeah, it sounds like they've had a complicated development.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate considering how good and well received Shadow of the Colossus was. It's ridiculous to me to think that they couldn't have worked on something, to follow it up with, even after, I guess,
a long time. Yeah, a long time.
It's been quite some time. So, yeah, it's a bummer. But there was also the game before that was Ico or Eco. I've heard it pronounced both, and I'm not sure what the official pronunciation is.
Yeah, I still don't know either.
But and the way the games are sort of subtly linked together, without spoiling anything, for anybody that hasn't played Shadow of Colossus, there's almost kind of a hint that they might be related, but of course they're not direct sequels or prequels. It's kind of ingenious, I think, how they really decided to go about it. I haven't played very much Ico, but I really did like what I saw and have heard good things about it. But I would imagine that Shadow of Colossus is still the better game, just from what I've heard too.
Ico is good, but it's not really my cup of tea. It's more of a laid-back puzzle game.
Yeah,
whereas Shadow of the Colossus is more...
Well, Shadow of Colossus has puzzle aspects to it, but the puzzle aspects, I think, are sort of woven into the action in a way that I thought was so awesome, because you're simultaneously fighting this giant monster while also having to use your brain and figure out, he's attacking you. You have to kind of study how he's attacking you, what his body looks like, to kind of realize, oh, wait, maybe I can actually grab onto that part of him, specifically when he's doing this, part of his combat routine while jumping off my horse, that kind of thing. Like, and each one just had a completely unique pattern and kind of puzzle, so to speak, that you had to figure out in order to just get up to his weak spot in the first place. It's very cool.
I think I remember seeing recently, I can't think of what game it was, but didn't a more recent game like completely rip off Shadows of the Colossus for one of their boss fights? And I remember seeing side-to-side footage of Shadows of the Colossus for whatever the game is, and it literally looked identical in terms of mechanics and everything, and how they were attacking the boss and everything.
I must have missed that, but
I can't think of what game it was for.
Now I'm really curious.
There have definitely been a lot of games that have taken inspiration from it, but
sure,
and can't think of what that could be.
Yeah, I'm trying to blank on what game it was, but
for some reason, I think the first games that really kind of gave me a similar feeling of Shadows of the Colossus in terms of atmosphere were probably the Souls series, like Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. Have you played those, Logan?
Yeah, I played Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. I have to agree. The atmosphere in Shadow of the Colossus is unsettling a little bit. It's kind of weird. It's a little bit creepy.
Yeah, that's a good word to use for it.
And Dark Souls and Demon's Souls are a similar way, where they're not necessarily horror games, but they're a little bit creepy.
Yeah, definitely. They kind of start skirting in that direction a bit. And interestingly, they also both they're Eastern games. They're games from Japan that it's not overwhelmingly in that style. It's almost like a weird hybrid. It's like an Eastern game that sort of has a bit of a Western feel to it in a way, like a Western fantasy feel. I would say that Shadow of Colossus, as well as the Souls games, are kind of that way.
Well, and both of them, they don't adhere to strict design rules that other games would follow. With Shadow of the Colossus, any other game would, they would at least put some small enemies in there. Someone along the way would say, "Hey, we need some small enemies."
Yeah.
But they just went with it and said, you know, we're not going to have any enemies except for these giant bosses. And Demon's Souls kind of has a similar design philosophy where they made the game super hard and challenging, even though that's not the trend right now, you know?
Yeah, definitely. But they were still smart with it and made it so every challenge, although each one was very challenging, it was still set up in such a way that it was hard not to learn how to get past those challenges just within the way that those challenges were designed. You know, it didn't need an arrow pointing you in a direction or tutorial text on the screen, because the challenges were just really cleverly designed in that way, where kind of like old school games, you know, classic video games, the Mega Man games and that sort of thing, where the levels are just designed that way, where something just killed me, but at the same time I can really easily see what I should have done, and I'll do that next time. Yeah, I really like that.
And I guess that's the other thing I really admire about Shadow of the Colossus is there's hardly any... I guess there's the like fake language in the cutscenes, but besides that, there's hardly any text in the game.
Yeah.
So there's nothing directly telling you what to do or where to go. It's just kind of... You kind of have to figure it out for yourself, and everything's designed in the game so that you can.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, and I love the world, too, that you're in, that you kind of, you know, you hold up your sword to reflect the sunlight, and that kind of helps you see the direction of your next Colossus, and that also kind of forces you to have to explore the world, so you kind of see, well, there's sort of a, there's an area over there between the mountains, it seems like I might be able to go through there, I wonder if that's where it's leading me, and you're forced to look at your environment and really explore it, and it was sort of the first time, I think, since Hyrule Fields in Ocarina of Time, where I really felt that immersion in a very large kind of fantasy world to explore it. Yeah, I could go on and on about this game. So yeah, it's a great choice. We mentioned a couple of more modern games in comparison to this one, and so that gets me wondering, if Shadow of Colossus is your favorite game of all time, what is your favorite more recent game? What game that came out over the last few years, I guess, stood out to you more than any other game?
Yeah, what's really impressed you or blown you away?
Huh. That's a good question.
Any games.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're super busy. You know, it's kind of like what our previous guest, Ty Taylor, said to us, when you're designing games, you really don't have much time to play other people's games.
Yeah.
So you know, that's totally understandable. But if there's anything, you know, I mean, previous guests have said the first Mass Effect. Ty said Portal 2, which, you know, was a really good one.
Sure. Well, let me load up my Steam library and just scroll through it real quick.
Yeah, pick the one that has the most hours.
Yeah,
pick the game that has 300 hours played.
Oh man, I do really like Dota 2.
Dota 2?
Yeah, but like I don't like playing it unless there's other people in the same room playing it.
Oh,
so that's kind of a hard one.
Yeah, that's interesting because games like that are almost made to allow people to play with people outside of their, you know, immediate life. So to prefer to play it with other people in the same vicinity is really cool, because I know there are other people like us too who grew up playing multiplayer games on the same couch as our friends and that sort of thing. So we try to seek out experiences like that for sure.
Yeah, well, I also played I played League of Legends with my roommates in college.
Yeah.
And so we just all played in the same room, and now I can't play that game without being able to strategize with people in the same room.
I could totally see that. How even though obviously, you know, there's voice over IP for all situations, it's still not quite the same as just being in the same room for sure.
Yeah, I can't play a MOBA without being on Skype at the very minimum. It's unplayable with random people that you can't talk to.
But, I mean, if you did want to talk about Dota 2, I mean, Tim could definitely talk about League of Legends and Blizzard's Heroes of the Storm in parallel to it.
I played a ton of the original Dota, so...
you know, I don't have much to say about Dota 2.
It's a fun game.
Yeah, that's about all I would have to say about Dota 2.
Yeah,
I really
keep looking through.
Yeah. Oh, this isn't PC, but I really like Mario Galaxy 2.
Ooh. Yeah, it doesn't have to be PC. Mario Galaxy 2, I wish I gave a chance. I haven't played. I want to play both Galaxies, and I want to play 3D Land and 3D World because I've just heard such good things about all of those, and I just have not. And it's really sad because I worked at Nintendo for a couple of years and had discounts and all that good stuff, but
didn't take advantage of it.
I
played the first Galaxies and I loved it, but I never got around to playing the second one.
What I had heard about the second one is that it only really existed because there was so much leftover content that didn't make it into the first one, so they figured out ways to repurpose it and add to it to create the second game, and I've only heard that the second game is better, which is really cool.
Yeah, well, Logan, what made the second one stand out to you as opposed to the first one?
There's no hub world.
Oh.
In Mario games, I don't really enjoy hub worlds just because Mario games are about platforming challenge and the hub worlds don't add much. And I guess there is a hub world in Mario Galaxy 2, but it's a lot smaller. It's basically just Mario's head, which is really weird.
Yeah.
And then instead they have like a world map, basically. That's the main differentiating factor and a lot of the power-ups are really cool too. They're really interesting.
Okay, did they add any new mechanics to the second game?
I think they added Yoshi to the second game, is that correct?
Yeah, they added Yoshi and then a bunch of power-ups like the Cloud Hat, which basically lets you make platforms underneath yourself.
Oh. Huh.
I forget exactly how it works. I think it's you can make up to 3 platforms underneath yourself before you have to land to be able to make more. Which is a pretty cool power-up.
Yeah, and then that's a cool mechanic that you only have those 3, so you have to strategize accordingly.
Yeah.
Well, what I will say is that the aspect of the Galaxy games that I'm the most familiar with is so good that I think the games would be worth playing just for these alone, and that's the soundtracks. The music in the Galaxy games is so ridiculously good for video game music. That, every track I've heard, I'll have like a video game radio station on, just an online radio, and then a Galaxy track will come on, and every time, like without fail, I'll be like, oh my god, what is this? It's so good, it's so well composed, and I'll take a look and see what it is, and lo and behold, it's either Mario Galaxies or Mario 3D Land.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly don't really remember the music, but it's been a while since I played the game, so.
Yeah, it's really heavily orchestrated, typically very high energy, and just like such a nice like blend of like kind of orchestral what's the word, like symphony kind of instruments as well as some electric synths and things like that. I don't know, I wonder if it's made by Koji Kondo, who makes the original Mario and Zelda music. I'm sure it is, but yeah, whoever does it does a fantastic job.
Yeah. Well, I have an actual answer for one of my most favorite recent games.
Okay.
30 Flights of Loving, it's called.
30 Flights of Loving. I have not heard of that. Is that an indie game?
Yes. It's made by Brendan Chung. He's made Atom Zombie Smasher and, what's the other games he's made? Gravity Bone. He has a really wide variety of games the types of games that he makes.
I've also heard of Gravity Bone, but I don't think that I've played one of his games.
Yeah, I can't think of any that I would have played.
But that's okay. I mean,
So tell us about 30 Flights of Loving.
Yeah, exactly. Describe the game.
So 30 Flights of Loving is actually it's a sequel to Gravity Bone.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually kind of cool. So he started making mods for games when he was young, and a lot of his games are connected in some way. And so these games go back to technically being sequels to his mods.
Oh wow!
But you don't need to know that to play these.
Sure.
And so Gravity Bone was just kind of this weird first-person, I guess you could call it an adventure game. And it was okay. Like, I thought it was kind of interesting when I played it originally. But 30 Flights of Loving, even though it's a sequel, it's kind of a completely different game. It's set in first person just like Gravity Bone, but instead of going around solving adventure game type puzzles, it's almost more like you're just kind of along for the ride, for basically a roller coaster ride, just to see the story.
Okay.
And what I find most interesting about it is that it uses film transitions in its gameplay. So you'll just be walking towards a goal, and then all of a sudden it'll jump cut to a completely different area. Or, for example, there's one scene where you're in an airport, and you're walking normal speed, but all the characters around you are walking super fast, and you can see a clock and it's going super fast, so it's almost like a time lapse scene. Yeah. And so it's just it's super interesting to me because it made me realize, especially since I am really against cutscenes for the most part, it made me realize that games are borrowing from film in all the wrong ways.
Sure. Yeah, okay, so yeah, that's actually sounds really clever then, if that's sort of the message that that game in its entirety kind of gets across. That's pretty cool. And that time-lapse scene that you described also sounds really cool. I'd be really interested in seeing that. Just, I mean, I really like time-lapse effects in general, so seeing that used in a game is really interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's like, I highly recommend it. It's like 15 minutes, maybe. It's really short.
Sure.
But it's worth it.
As you said earlier, you know, quality over quantity.
So is it kind of like commentary in the way Stanley Parable is? Have you played the Stanley Parable?
Yeah, I don't think it's as direct a commentary. Like, there's no part that says like directly to players that, you know, games should be this way or anything like that.
Sure.
Right, yeah.
It's more of just Brendan
subtle
experimenting with that sort of thing.
Sure.
Okay.
So you described Gravity Bone as a first-person adventure game where you actually had puzzles to solve, and I'm assuming those puzzles aren't here in the sequel. So is it more like a first-person exploration game then, like Gone Home or Dear Esther?
I wouldn't even call it exploration. So it's almost like a heist movie, and it's just action scene after action scene essentially. And there's a few parts where it's quiet and more serene, but then you'll walk 5 steps and then it jump cuts to a new scene where you've got to go and you've got to get to this new goal.
Sure.
Interesting.
Is it kind of surreal or dreamlike?
Yeah, definitely. There's a scene near the end where you're driving down a highway on a motorcycle and the whole sky is just pink. Like, everything around you is pink.
Oh, wow. That's
For
awesome.
no reason. It's just kind of like this surreal area. It's cool.
I really like surreal stuff like that. Like, if you're familiar with the show Twin Peaks or the director David Lynch, he's known for making really just interesting, surreal, dreamy, weird stuff. And I definitely...
It's funny that you mentioned that, because both Twin Peaks and 30 Flights of Loving are kind of inspiration and things that we're looking at for reference for Four-Sided Fantasy, because
nice.
That's like a big thing that I want to incorporate is, I mean, a lot of the atmosphere is sort of surreal.
Yeah.
But also the film transitions, I want to try to... I want to experiment with that and see if I can do that in a 2D side-scroller, because sure. I haven't seen that in any but one game, and so I want to see it and see if I can pull it off in a 2D platformer.
That's a noble goal for sure.
Well, this seems like a good enough segue, so why don't we talk about Four-Sided Fantasy? Why don't you tell the audience, describe the game, what is it about? What is it?
Yeah. So Four-Sided Fantasy is a puzzle platformer similar to something like Braid, but instead of like time control or something like that, the whole mechanic is centered around screen wrap. So in Pac-Man, when you go off one side of the screen and you come out on the other, it's like that, but you can turn it on and off at any time. So think about just going through a normal Mario level and then turning on the ability to wrap around to the other side of the screen. And it's based around that, essentially. And you're solving puzzles using that mechanic. And then there's some other ways that we vary it up and experiment with other things. We're experimenting with 2-player split screen. So you could jump from one player's screen to the other to solve puzzles.
That's how it would work. That's awesome.
Yeah, and camera rotation for single player, so you can tilt how the camera is looking at the player, and that changes how the screen wrap works. There's a lot of interesting mechanics that we can get out of it.
So is it like a screen tilt like in The Bridge?
Yeah, but instead of affecting gravity, it's just affecting how... Wrap. Yeah, it's affecting where the borders of the screen are, essentially.
That's really fascinating. That's a really cool idea, because I was wondering, the fourth wall was really cool, and I was wondering how you were going to expand on that in Four-Sided Fantasy, and that sounds like a really interesting way to do that. And I'm really excited for this game, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I actually, my memory is terrible, so this is going to sound bad, but I don't remember if I looked at footage from Four-Sided Fantasy as a result of knowing that we were going to be interviewing you, or if I just happened to come across it just elsewhere, because I have a number of gaming sites and blogs that kind of come through my Facebook feed, so I'm looking at stuff all the time. And as you started describing the game, I thought to myself, oh yeah, I've totally looked at this game. I think I actually looked at the Kickstarter
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember if that was just incidental or if that was because we were going to have you on the show, which that's also me giving away that I'm a crappy host for not doing my research or potentially not doing my research. I don't know. I'm a space case. But
I even told you to play the fourth wall.
You did tell me to play the fourth wall, and I failed to make time for that, so I do apologize, but I will take both of your words for it that it is a great game. I recall watching that trailer and thinking that it looked really cool. I mean, just seeing the character sort of fall into a pit, but then fall back out of the sky and then onto another platform that's higher up, and you kind of showed off a lot of the clever ways that mechanic is used in the trailer.
The mechanic that really took me a while to understand that it's something that you can do was if there's something blocking, for example, the top of the screen, and you turn on the wrap, you can then walk across the bottom, even if there's no platform or anything there.
Yeah.
And I just could not put that together in my head that that's a thing you can do. You know what I mean?
Because it's the ceiling basically.
Yeah, there's something
covering the very top of the screen.
Yeah, exactly.
So now the bottom that would have been a pit is now a platform.
Exactly.
Yeah, because there's nowhere else to go.
That's pretty cool.
And I accidentally stumbled upon that. I can't remember which level or whatever, but there's a point where you have to use that. And
I'm guessing that's in the predecessor game to the one that's coming out.
Yeah, the fourth wall.
The fourth wall.
Exactly. Yeah. And and I accidentally did it. Like I was like, oh, that's something I can do. It's like,
so you can kind of
it was really
throw that into
clever.
your bag of tricks.
Yeah, and that was one of the hardest things to teach, and it's still something that I want to teach even better in Four-Sided Fantasy, because it's one of the first instances that you encounter where you wouldn't see it in like Kid Icarus or Pac-Man or something like that, because you aren't able to turn that ability off or on in those games.
Yeah, exactly. There were a lot of things that were just kind of like, okay, intuitively you can see what needs to happen because you know how screen wrap works. It's those situations where, like you just said, where something new happens because you're able to turn it off on and off at will, where you're just like, whoa, and it kind of blows your mind.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the best part about having sort of innovative mechanics that we really haven't seen in other games is the sort of incidental things where you kind of come across ways that you can interact with those mechanics that you would not have realized. You know, there's the aspect of it where you're thinking, oh yeah, just by thinking logically, I kind of understand how this should work. But there's always going to be surprises too.
Yeah, well, that's why I find making puzzle games so interesting, is because it's basically what I'm doing when I'm creating a level is relaying the thought process I had when I thought up that puzzle, like when I realized that could happen in the first place. And so, like, if I design a puzzle well, then it's, I give that satisfaction to the player too, and not just like, oh, it's something I figured out and then didn't really do anything with. It's something useful.
That's really cool too, that you can sort of translate that to the perspective of the player as the designer, in terms of kind of finding that out with you, so to speak, which is really cool. And something else too that stood out to me when I looked at the Kickstarter was that I really liked the art style, and just sort of the shading and the colors and the little sprite. Is there a specific artist that you're working with?
Yeah, we actually have three and a half artists.
Wow.
One of the artists is he's like a designer too. He's doing UI design for the game as well. So like marketing materials and title treatment and stuff like that. So yeah, basically everybody is from the same school that I went to. Graduates from the DigiPen Institute of Technology.
Nice.
So
yeah, we're located in Redmond, so we're familiar with DigiPen.
Okay,
cool.
I walk by it sometimes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so we all either worked on projects together or knew each other from previous, just running into each other at the school or whatever. So
awesome.
Yeah, we were able to get the team together pretty quickly.
You were referred to us by Brett Cutler, who works for 17-Bit, our previous guest, and then I saw on your Kickstarter video that you actually did some work at 17-Bit as well. What capacity were you working on? Did you work on Galaxy? Is that what the game you were working on?
Yeah, so I was an intern there when they started Galaxy. So basically, it was a bunch of us interns and the rest of the 17-Bit team sort of working together to create like the original prototype for Galaxy. Nice. And so I basically, even though I'm a designer at my core, it was basically a programming and scripting job in Unity, which, like, no complaints. It was an awesome job.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, the more experience you can build up, the better,
Yeah, and that was my first time using Unity, too, so it was an awesome experience to figure out how to use Unity, because that's what I'm using now. for Four-Sided Fantasy.
Sure.
And it was basically over the summer, and we just built that original prototype to figure out what that game was going to be while they were finishing up Skulls of the Shogun.
Nice.
I wouldn't say completely different, but it was pretty different when I was there. Nowadays, it's a roguelike, essentially. It's kind of similar to like Rogue Legacy and stuff like that, but when I was working on it, we were thinking more like open world, sort of Super Metroid type game. So it's changed over time, but I think it's going in an interesting direction.
Galaxy, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I didn't realize that it was going in a roguelike direction. We played it a little bit at the Seattle Retro Game Expo recently.
Oh, okay.
Well, he mentioned, or at least to me, Brett mentioned that it was going to be a roguelike.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. I know he said that Super Metroid was an influence.
Yeah.
We talked about it, but I guess I didn't realize it was more like a roguelike. I like both, Metroidvanias, and I like roguelikes. And roguelikes are a genre I've more recently become familiar with.
Because they're more recently becoming a thing. You know what I mean? They existed before, but now, it's like, now that label is being put on games where those games existed, but they weren't necessarily called roguelikes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess
it's like how RPGs started like invading every game. It's roguelikes now are invading every game.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So me and Dane have kind of split feelings on roguelikes. My question for you as a game designer, what do you think of the roguelike concept?
I really enjoy it. Depending on the game, like on a game-to-game basis, something like Rogue Legacy, where there's progression, where after you die you can buy something that's permanent throughout, like you gain a new ability. That I like that at first, but in the long run, I see it as like, oh, I'm basically grinding. I can't get to the end of the game until I go through and buy all these things.
Yeah, it does. It does kind of devolve to that.
It sounds like if you keep on... I've never played Rogue Legacy, unfortunately, but I've heard good things about it. But it seems like if you keep accumulating new stuff, eventually you're just going to be overpowered, like for whatever content you're on.
You can be, if you so choose. Or you can decide, I think I'm strong enough. Like, you can challenge yourself and say, well, I've got a few power-ups. I'm going to go try that boss that was ridiculously hard the last time I fought him, just to see if I can beat him this time.
Sure.
So it all depends.
And whereas Spelunky, there's literally no progression except for like permanent progression except for unlocking characters, which I don't enjoy in the short term because I like unlocking things, but in the long term I enjoy it because it means that I can technically, if I'm good enough, I can go over to a friend's house, boot up a fresh save, and beat the game in one run.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is kind of cool.
Did you play Risk of Rain by any chance?
Yes, and I really enjoy that game. I love that game.
I loved it as well.
And that actually, I think, strikes a good balance between... it's not perfect, but I think that's a good balance between, like, the unlocks are just items that are different instead of better, and characters that are different instead of better, as far as I've seen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, of course, there's a little bit of balance. Some items, you're happier when you get them than others, and some characters you might end up, having a way better, easier time with than others. But the fact that the things that you're unlocking, you can still only get as you play by chance is pretty different, I think, than something like Rogue Legacy, where you permanently can gain.
See, I think what would have fixed Risk of Rain for me, and I kind of hesitate to... I feel bad using the word fix because I did really enjoy the game. I mean, I'm not saying that the game is broken, so what would improve it? That's a better word. Okay. What would improve Risk of Rain was having the possibility to turn certain items off. I'm not saying like turn 90% off so only the best items drop for you, but at least give you the option to turn off like 2 or 3 items, because there was some item that there was literally 0 situations where I actually wanted that item. You know what I mean? Like whatever the one is that
different things
that lets you do like the head smash if you're falling far enough, you can kill enemies by dropping them. I never once used that item with its intended purpose. Every time I got that, I would just and there were other items that were kind of like give and take, like the snake dice or whatever they're called, which if you watch our Let's Plays, you'll see my opinion on the dice. But anyway,
we did some co-op Let's Plays with I think 4 of us playing Risk of Rain, and we also reviewed Risk of Rain for our game review show that we were running for a while. And And yeah, I mean, we do feel pretty differently on it, Tim and I, but I both ultimately enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept, roguelike. That is, you know, I don't have as much experience with roguelikes. I've played, like, you know, Risk of Rain, obviously, FTL, Faster Than Light.
I think Faster Than Light was the first one that I really played in any serious capacity, and that's what kind of got me interested in them.
And what I've noticed of the roguelikes I've played, and my biggest complaint is that there always seems to be some cheap way that you can die. Now, the argument against that is, oh, it's not a big deal because you're only playing for 5 minutes, you can start over and get right back into it anyway. Yeah. But I mean, like, that's not a good response. Like, that's not acceptable to me. Like,
well, so that actually kind of makes me think about what I think one of the hardest things to do if you're making a roguelike is get the difficulty curve right, because essentially you're having a huge variety of players all start from the same point, and if you're doing something like Spelunky, you know, you're not giving them abilities over time. After they die, they don't keep those abilities, and so it's like it's hard to strike that balance between super hard and super easy, you know?
Yeah, definitely, especially when there's so many variances.
I can see the issue, definitely. It's just, I think me and Dane mentioned it on our review of Risk of Rain is, you know, the intensity that comes with knowing that something can pop up and kill you at any second. Sure. You know, that kind of makes it more thrilling.
Yeah, it's exciting.
I guess my argument was they could make it just as exciting and less cheap. You know what I mean? It can still be exciting, but it doesn't have to necessarily have... Because, like, on FTL, for example, it's just so annoying when something... You get invaded by 4 of the high-damage aliens. I can't remember what they're called now. It's been a while since I played it, but... And there's literally, like, you just... There's nothing you can do, like...
Yeah.
I just...
Well, that game especially had the random encounters that could just, you know, pop up, like... Oh, which of these 2 options are you going to pick? You don't really, you know, both of them can potentially screw you over or benefit you.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes, it rolls the dice real bad.
And one of the things I think some of the roguelikes do to combat, like, the difficulty curve thing is with the difficulty settings. Like, I think Risk of Rain has it and FTL has it, but the hard thing there is that I never want to play games on easy because I feel like I'm not playing the real game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think they need to convey it differently than difficulty setting in roguelikes because, I mean, in just single-player, more standard games, we've conveyed it as difficulty settings for so long that everybody knows, like, if they choose hard or normal or easy when they play a game. But with roguelikes, it's almost like a progression, you know? I should really start it easy on FTL, but I didn't until like a year later when I came back to it, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try to unlock something. Maybe I'll play it on easy.
Yeah. I think I did easy to get all my unlocks in FTL for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, we did the hardest difficulty on one of our Risk of Rain games, I think. And you know how Risk of Rain has, like, the timer, so you can, like, see the difficulty ramping up on the... It's almost like a thermometer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that thing just goes up so fast on the hardest difficulty. Yeah. It's insane. I can't imagine someone actually beating the game.
It is ridiculous. Well, it's all about luck, I think, on the hardest difficulty. If you can kind of get your bonuses or your unlocks or whatever you want to call them, your items, quickly, if you get lucky and can get those very quickly, you can get kind of small combinations that start to build up, and you kind of have to increase your own power at the rate that the enemies are getting more powerful as well.
But it got so crazy because I think it was like we got to the 3rd stage, I think, but it was like a boss would spawn every 5 seconds or something.
Yeah, the bosses were spawning on top of us repeatedly.
Yeah, exactly. It was just it became unmanageable.
Yeah, I think on single player, because you can't do this feature on multiplayer, on single player, if you happen to get that special level where there's like a pig boss that spawns over and over and you farm that, I think, if you can do that and then just farm it and keep getting power-ups and you get
like the cow level.
Yeah, it's like a cow level in the third level. If you get the snow level, once again, it's a roguelike, so it's all just a toss of the dice. But yeah, that was one way to do it, but... another thing I appreciated about that game was that it was made by a duo from the Seattle area, University of Washington students. I thought that was really cool. We never did get the chance to interview them, but now we actually have an interview show, so maybe we can.
Actually, one of the guys, I think it's Duncan, he's actually, or was, maybe he still is, I don't know, he was in the same department that I graduated from at UW, so.
Oh, nice.
Like a kinship with him.
Yeah.
So you mentioned when you were talking about games that impressed you, or rather when you were talking about different games that you could call your favorite, you did mention Braid, and we were talking about Shadows of the Colossus before, which I don't have much experience with. I love Braid, so I'm going to talk about Braid if that's okay with you.
Okay, sure.
And I haven't really played Braid, so yeah, I'll sit on the back burner.
I'll just rub it in your face. Obviously, I have my reasons for loving the game, but what really stood out to you in Braid, like as a game designer?
So one of my favorite things about Braid is, I mentioned ironically enough, my penchant for, I dislike cutscenes in general, a bunch of text in games, so I mean it's kind of ironic that I like Braid because there's so much text in that game.
Yeah, that's my least favorite part of the game.
Yeah,
for sure.
On the books, but the interesting thing about that is that it's better than a lot of AAA games that don't let you skip a cutscene. If you don't like the books in Braid, you can walk right past them, and I think that's a good point. Like Jonathan Blow has said that multiple times to people that complained about the books. But what I was getting at is the ending of Braid is one of the best combinations of gameplay and story that I've seen, and it's something that I strive for when I'm making games. Is a lot of game developers will kind of separate games and story and say, okay, here's the story part and here's the games part, but that's really weird to me. Like I don't think that should happen. Like if I do a thing as the main character in a game, that's story. Like no matter what I do, that's gonna make a story. If I kill 20 civilians in GTA, that should change the character in, that shows up in the cutscene, but it doesn't really.
Sure. And
so that's really why I appreciate Braid, is just mainly because that ending is a really interesting combination of the two, and it's unfortunate that the rest of the game doesn't really have that same style.
Yeah, I agree. The rest of the game is more like a standard puzzle platformer. I shouldn't say standard because it's not in the mechanics.
It still stands out.
The mechanics are really fascinating to me, and that's because I played the game originally back when it came out, and I really liked it, but I never actually finished it. And then a few weeks ago, I picked it up again, and I finally finished it, and I was like, holy crap, I had no idea the ending was like this. Like, it blew me away, the ending did, which...
Jonathan blew you away.
But no, like, endings is something... I often have an issue with endings of things in general, movies, games, books, whatever, because like it's hard to get an ending right. It's hard to get an ending that gives you closure and
what do you
is
mean?
satisfying and everything.
Mass Effect 3 did it perfectly.
No. I don't. No.
Sorry, let's just.
Now you got me all mad. Anyway,
oh my gosh, those waveforms.
Sorry about that. But no. So yeah, I can totally see what you're talking about, and I've never. I don't want to spoil anything, but the way that the ending works, how the ending is a level that you play, and then it really is a fascinating way to tell the story. Which, like you said, the rest of the game, it's weird that the ending was like that when the rest of the game was just some books and then some puzzles. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Well, and what I do like about the rest of the game is that I don't know how, but just through the atmosphere of the game, I knew something was up. Like I knew something weird was going to happen at the end. Sure. Or not necessarily at the end, but I knew like something was off and that like this wasn't a normal game. Besides like the mechanical aspect, I knew something was weird was going to happen with the story. I just didn't know what, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, that actually kind of makes me think of, without even having played Braid, but just hearing you describe it that way, that makes me think of, once again, Shadow of the Colossus, which does a similar thing where it also hints at something that is coming without making it really obvious, what that's going to be. But the way it gets just a little darker and a little bleaker as you move forward, the way that it makes you think that you're accomplishing one thing when something else is going to happen, essentially.
Yeah, and Braid did that well, especially if you read through all the books, just kind of the language that you're reading a diary essentially.
You have to read in that game.
Yeah, that's what we were gonna say. That's what we were mentioning before. Is there's a lot of reading. Like most of the story is told through reading diaries, which I hated personally. I didn't hate the story. I just hated the fact that I had to read it.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of your pet peeves in general.
Yeah, exactly. As you go through, the language that is being used just gets a little more unsettling. And like you said, there's just something you're like, okay, this clearly isn't a love story, as it kind of seems like it's gonna be in the beginning. You know what I mean?
That's as far as I got when I played the demo back when it first came out. I played it on Xbox Live Arcade. And yeah, actually, now that you mention, I do remember it being like a happy-go-lucky kind of like, oh, this dapper chap is on his little quest, and it did seem like a love story.
Well, and the music. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, that's okay. No. Go for it.
The music, it was so unconventional for its time, especially for the type of game it was. That I think that also kind of put me on edge, and I was like, "What's up with this game?" It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I love the music. I still do love the music. I still listen to it every now and then. The soundtrack. Yeah. It's kind of neat because
so good.
The music was so different, but it's composed in such a way where there's different movements and like that first world song. When you get to the third movement in the song, you're like, this isn't a cheery. You know what I mean? Is
it dissonant?
Yeah, they definitely have some dissonance in there. But yeah, and there's also the parallel to Mario and how you like at the end of each world, there's like hey, your princess is in another castle, but it's like, what are you doing here? Like, you know what I mean? It progressively becomes like the guy who's telling you becomes, he's more uncomfortable with you being there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
what about that restraining order, dude? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm just guessing. Now I really do want to play it.
Yeah, you have to play the ending, because at least, you have to finish the game, because the ending really is...
Yeah.
Even if you knew it was going to happen, experiencing it is just so much...
That's awesome, because that's one of those things that I would even say could potentially be spoiler-proof, so to speak, because someone could tell it to you, but honestly... when you play it, it's just such a different experience as opposed to so many other things where if you know what's going to happen, it kind of ruins the experience regardless,
Yeah, well, that's why I think telling the narrative through gameplay is so valuable, is because it's completely different than someone telling it to you or seeing it in a movie or something. To fully experience it, you have to essentially play it,
Yeah, you got to be immersed in it. And another thing that I really liked about Braid, which, it's so cool how the mechanics of the game just kind of, you get that huge payoff in the ending when you realize what the time travel means or whatever. That didn't come out quite as thoughtful as I meant to. I'm going to say something intelligent or whatever. Anyway, I thought it was really cool how they had really unique mechanics, and what really inspired me to finish the game was how, you experienced the going back in time mechanic in the first world, but then each new world adds some other way that mechanic becomes unique, and each world feels like a unique from the rest, and I really, really enjoyed that. Yeah,
that is something sort of like that, the unlocking in roguelikes. It's nice to look forward to something mechanically that something new is coming, but you don't know exactly what it's going to be.
Exactly.
And, speaking of game mechanics, specifically the mechanics of Braid, that's a good segue to the end of the interview, technically, because typically at the end of each show, we ask a question that the previous guest came up with, and that actually just reminded me of what our previous guest's question was, which was if you could take one really unique game mechanic.
Well, he said two. So now your answers can't be the mechanics that you've come up with.
Okay.
But he basically said, what two puzzle platformer mechanics would you kind of put in a blender and mix up to make a unique experience?
Oh, man. What?
Yeah. I think his example was the time manipulation from Braid with the portals from Portal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which, imagine you have one portal in one point in time and another portal in another.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have some portals where one of the portals wouldn't get affected by time, kind of like how in Braid, how there's things that, you can go back in time, but they keep going forward,
Yeah.
Sure.
The idea of both space and time manipulation simultaneously is really cool to me.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. All right.
Our goal here is that whatever you come up with will be the inspiration for your next game. There.
Yeah, Totally. This is kind of like a game jam. Haha.
Okay. The gravity gun mixed with the multiplayer of samurai gun. So you just have gravity guns to attack each other with.
Okay. And samurai gun, that's actually not one that we're familiar with.
Oh, okay. Have you played Towerfall?
I think we wanted to play Towerfall. I suggested that as a game that we should.
Didn't we review it, Towerfall?
No, I don't think that was Towerfall. That was Freedomfall.
Oh, you're right, Freedomfall.
Yeah, Towerfall was a little more recent.
Yeah, they're both like local multiplayer games that are. Well, personally, I prefer Samurai Gun, but they're both super fast paced. Mm-hmm. Samurai Gun, I'm more familiar with. But basically, you have a sword and 3 bullets each life, and that's basically all you have. So I would propose taking the sword out and the gun and just having gravity guns to shoot each other with.
And then a variety of... It would take place in Ravenholm. And we have, like, the giant saw blades and stuff to shoot at each other.
Yeah.
Really, because when I think of using the gravity gun to shoot things at people, I think of Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, and it was always a urinal.
Yeah.
Just, like, ripping toilets and bathtubs off the walls and shooting those at people.
Yeah,
so
well, in the Ravenholm level... In Half-Life 2, there were just so many things that were just super dangerous things that were perfect for shooting.
Yeah, well, that's good. Down. That's good game design. If they're going to give you a completely unique gravity-altering weapon to throw in levels like that, that's awesome.
Why don't more games have gravity guns? Come on,
it's patented.
Let's go. Let's go, Logan. But you're next. Make a game with the gravity gun.
No, honestly, a gravity gun or gravity gun style mechanics in a kind of local multiplayer game like that sounds like it would be really chaotic, but that would also be the appeal. That could be a lot of fun.
And I should clarify that Samurai Gun's a 2D game, so it's... Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It is your turn to come up with a question for the next guest, and we're not sure exactly who the next guest will be. Most likely someone, that has a gaming background. Currently, we're talking to my friend Melanie Mack. She's a live streamer and a YouTuber. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just it technically doesn't have to be a video game related question. One of our guests asked what was your favorite, I guess your favorite point in time in your life, like your happiest year.
What was your best moments in life? And another one said, what filmmaker has never let you down? We've also had what TV shows do you think were canceled?
Too early, or jumped the shark and went on too long.
Sure. So, it doesn't have to be about video games, but it can be. I mean, obviously.
Okay. All right. So my question would be to the next guest, what is your favorite so bad it's good game? And if you don't have one, then a so bad it's good movie.
Awesome. That's a great
I'm going to take that question and say, we'll do both. Game and movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's perfect. Yeah, because I think everybody has those.
For sure.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite so bad it's good games is Deadly Premonition.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, because I was going to say, what we've been doing is you come up with a question and then we say, surprise, you have to answer it. So what would your answers be to? I guess you gave your answer to the game, but what about movie?
Sure, and the game one actually I would think is tough because I can't, like, before Deadly Premonition came along, I couldn't find any. But
sure. I mean, maybe aspects sprinkled into games like Resident Evil had such bad voice acting that it was iconic. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, I mean, for movie, it would have to be the classic The Room.
I was gonna say, The Room, definitely.
Can't go wrong with that one.
No.
I like Kung Pao Enter the Chicken.
Ooh,
no, it's Enter the Fist, right?
I thought it was Enter the Chicken.
No, I think it's Enter the Fist.
I think it's Enter the Fist. Yeah, that's a good one, though.
Wasn't there... I thought there was a chicken in the title. Maybe not. Maybe there's just a chicken in the movie. I don't remember.
There might be a chicken on the box.
Yeah, maybe there is like
But yeah, that movie's fun.
Yeah.
The Room is hilarious, and the fact, like, there's like, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's little known at this point, but when Tommy Wiseau, the absolutely insane individual, or perhaps genius individual who made that film, he didn't know which film format he wanted to film it in, so he actually put 2 cameras side by side, one digital, one analog. To film the entire movie, which means that he has the capability of converting it to 3D, which is actually something that he's done. I think it's coming out on 3D in 3D on Blu-ray really soon.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Yeah, so keep an eye out for that, and maybe have a viewing party with friends when it comes out on Blu-ray if you have access to a 3D TV. And I'm pretty sure one like a pre-order gift or maybe just a packaged thing is a red and blue pair of men's briefs that say The Room on them.
Nice.
So yeah, everything surrounding that movie is ridiculous.
So yeah, thanks again for coming on, Logan. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us about video games, something that we all love talking about.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And where can people find you and your projects and your company?
Sure. So my personal website is loganfieth.com.
Okay.
And then foursightedfantasy.com is the game's website. And I also run a podcast called Good Enough for Video Games.
Nice.
You can find that at goodenoughforvideogames.blogspot.com.
Okay.
And I think that about covers it.
Awesome. And we'll, of course, link to those in the description.
Does Ludo Land have a website?
We don't currently have a website yet, but we do have a press kit just on the Four-Sided Fantasy website.
Okay. Twitter accounts or anything like that?
Yeah. I'm at Lo-Fi on Twitter. That's LO_FI_.
Nice.
There you go. Lo-Fi.
Cool. Okay.
So again, this has been Tim and Dane from SharcTank Media. Listen to the show Name Your Game. We work on several other projects at SharcTank.com. We're a non-profit, volunteer-driven gaming and geek culture site based out of Seattle. We do local convention coverage, Let's Plays, tabletop strategy, game reviews, and so many other things. So like and subscribe if you want to support us. You can leave feedback through comments on YouTube, on our website, or email us at NYG for Name Your Game at SharcTank.com. And don't forget, that's Shark with a C. So yeah.
Until next time.
Oh yeah. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.